Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at Riderflex. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. And as a reminder, please subscribe to the Riderflex show for updates on new episodes. And by the way, if you haven't already, check out the book we recently launched, The Riderflex Guide, Inspiring and Hiring, available for purchase on Amazon. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
Heather Potters, how are you today? Good to see you again.
Thank you. It's great to be back and be able to share kind of latest, greatest. And I have to say, I feel like I'm a little tired, dragging a little bit just because things are busy, good. And, I'm kind of last on my list personally.
Well, your vibe feels good. Your energy feels good. You're smiling. So that's good.
Yeah. We've accomplished a lot lately, and it's been a lot of work. I suppose it always is for everybody. Nobody knows ever what it's like to be you, but life is busy, good, busy, full with some good accomplishments.
I'm anxious to get into all the PharmaJet updates. Isn't it true, running a business, being a founder of a business, being on the board, being a CEO, it's hard, right? Like it's a very challenging life. I was telling somebody the other day, one of my new favorite lines is being a regular employee is kind of easy almost compared to being an entrepreneur.
It is, it's sometimes it's a thankless job, or sometimes it's just that extra stress that goes along with, meeting payroll and doing way too much at the same time, and family sacrifices and having to be always on.
Yes.
And I think, for me personally, I'm always wanting things to go well. So at PharmaJet, kind of our corporate culture is, to be tenacious and deliver the highest quality, the best of all the time. Bar's pretty high. So what's expected of all of us and everybody is just that. And we do a pretty good job of it. But the truth is that it's nice to slow down every once in a while and say thank you. Or it's nice to take a little bit of time just to reflect on, what's most important. It's a combination of personal and business.
Your work ethic and competitive spirit, that came from I'm assuming your parents just drove
genetic.
A lot of
Yes.
that, right? Yeah.
It's completely.
Yeah, I figured, I didn't ask you a lot last time about your mom and dad. I know your mom was in the healthcare space, I believe. I think maybe your dad too, but
Both of them. Yeah.
Okay. Can you give me, why don't you give us an overview of both of them real quick? Would like to hear more about them.
Sure. Well, my dad came from kind of a grapes of wrath family, born in the Depression. He was number 8 out of 8 kids. And he and his siblings all banded together, and they put each other through school. And they all became either, in the case of the men, orthodontists. There were 4 of them. Or in the case of the women, nurses or hygienists, dental hygienists.
Wow.
So that work ethic of family and work hard and show up and dig in was from his upbringing. And then in combination with my mother, who came from a very entrepreneurial upbringing, she ended up meeting my dad in dental school, and she pursued a dental hygiene degree.
Okay.
And then eventually she ran his practices. So they actually worked together. And my father was a very significant Rotarian. I'd say that my mother was informally a Rotarian, but they did volunteer medicine and dentistry around the world in their spare time. And we hosted people from 29 countries by the time I was 18. And it included exchange, not just students, but professionals. So the combination of international upbringing and help your fellow man and work hard, and they worked together, just was, from day one, it really integrated. And then you add to that, I think the importance of education, the importance of having a global perspective. And I am positive that influenced what I studied, where I did, how I worked, how I approached work, and the whole flow through ethics.
No doubt about it. Is your dad still alive? Is your mom still with us?
He is. He's 87 and cantankerous, and he stopped practicing at 82. And everybody said, it's time, it's time, it's time. And then my mother just turned 81, and they've recently relocated to Florida. And so living the best life ever in that last chapter, I guess. But there's still the spirit. And it used to be a bit of a trade secret, but my mother and I co-founded PharmaJet.
Yes,
so, family is super important, but we were very aligned on making sure that, we continue with everything we possibly can do to make this business successful.
So they're still married all these years?
All these years, 60 years.
60 years. Oh, wow. Okay, that's pretty impressive. Okay, and still in decent health, good shape?
Relatively. I'd say that, little things start to become bigger things as you get older, but relatively. Thank you.
Okay. You go down to Florida and visit with them?
Of late, yes. It's been like a vacation destination without the vacation. Getting them moved and relocated, but I love the palm trees and sunshine.
Who was tougher? Who was more strict, your mom or your dad?
Oh, that's funny. My dad certainly had a lot of chores, on his list on the weekend. And so it was one of those things where there was not an option not to be involved in the chores. And then with respect to my mother, it's really funny. I was a pretty responsible oldest sister. I have two siblings, and she would consistently be reminding my brothers that she was going to wash their mouth out with soap if they cussed, and those kinds of things. But they mostly just kind of laughed at her because it's not that she's a wimp. It's just more that, that's the boy thing. But my mother's the kindest and one of the most resilient, tough women that I know from her era of time, all the way through, her lifetime. She was a real champion of women. She employed people. She worked really hard. She raised 3 kids, and she continues to, dig in and try and be involved in her communities and her church and all kinds of things. And now her kind of retirement era.
It's interesting. You mentioned the chore list. My youngest son, Spencer, one time when he was still at home, they're all out of the house now, but Spencer tells me one Saturday afternoon, he said, Dad, you're the only dad that I know that has a list on the counter on Saturday morning when we wake up with all the stuff we have to do. So I would pre-make a list, like here's the pre-made list when you get up, all these things.
Yeah.
Were you a good kid, straight A student at the library? Was there any, wild streaks in there? What kind of kid was Heather?
People would say that I probably was, more mature beyond my years. I, from time to time, got straight A's. I don't think I was a straight A student all the time. There were certain subjects that I liked more than others, but I worked reasonably hard, in school. But athletic, I grew up with horses, so that was always a fun family thing to do. And so I had a really well-rounded life, and then quite a lot of international travel from a very early age. The first time that I lived abroad by myself was when I was 14. I lived in Chile for a summer. We were all given interesting experiences to kind of stretch ourselves. My middle brother went to live with the Maasai tribe in Kenya for a summer. So we had, remarkable freedom to do things, but the expectation was that you're going to do something with that, and you're going to, dig in, be helpful, be respectful, participate. And so it was a unique education beyond simply just, reading books and things like that.
So no, you didn't have to call Dad from the sheriff's office or anything? Nothing fun?
None of that.
You can confess on the podcast.
I knew I'd get in big trouble. And I also learned to fly at an early age. So the only time that I probably had a couple of beers, my dad met me at the front door and said, "How about if we go flying tomorrow at 6 a.m.?" And
Really? Are you serious?
yeah, that's all he had to say was, I was the kind of kid that got airsick pretty easily. So yeah, I was a good kid. I was a pretty model
How
kid.
about
It was
did
my
you
brothers.
loosen up? Did you loosen up in college a little bit or no?
Oh, a little tiny bit, but I went to a small college in California, so it's hard to get in trouble. I think we had 800 students.
Ooh, yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
pretty tiny, and then I guess in business school, they made it fun and appropriate to make sure that we had a pub to all hang out in, so that none of us got in trouble. So yeah, yeah.
And how about now? I don't know if I know anything now. Married, kids, what's the status? Give us the social status, if you don't mind.
So I am unmarried now. I was married. I have two kids who are now 23 and 25 in a week.
Oh,
So
okay.
two boys, Earl and Clint, and in their own right, they've also become global citizens. They've lived in 3, 4 countries, speak 3
Nice.
languages, have a couple of passports, so that helps.
Very
But
nice.
I met my husband in business school, and we embarked on our kind of excursion that turned into living in Poland for nearly 20 years together. So he is Dutch, and he lives in the Netherlands right now.
I see. I see. So you're remarried or you're still married to the same guy?
No, we're divorced, and I have a significant other. His name is Brian. But
Ah,
yeah,
okay.
I have a feeling that once people have been married, they understand that it's not just about the piece of paper, it's about the commitment.
Yeah,
So
no doubt.
yeah, for
No,
me, being unmarried is fine, but I'm in a committed relationship.
I got you. I want to ask you a couple of questions. I've been through the same thing. Marriage or divorce is tough. Did that happen in when you were overseas or back here? Did that have anything to do with it living abroad? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, it was finalized here, but it started when I was living in Poland.
Do you
Yeah,
think
yeah.
did that have something to do with it or no? Living abroad? No.
No, I don't think so. I think it was more that we each had amazingly busy and intense lives, and it became all about like the family corporation as opposed to the family. It wasn't a corporation. It shouldn't be a corporation. Family shouldn't, you know, have to
Mm,
have to kind of I
mm,
think toe the line and climb the ladder. And so I think there was just a complete, disconnect on philosophy that caused,
mm,
the
mm,
cessation, if you will, of
mm.
it's time to move on.
Based on the timeline you're describing, so that means, correct me if I'm getting this wrong. So when you and your mom were starting PharmaJet, or at least during the early years, you're trying to get a company going, you were single. Is that accurate?
Um, I would say I was not yet divorced, but generally operating independently.
That's tough.
But but my ex-husband's also an investor in PharmaJet, and so very very supportive in terms of trying to
Okay.
help.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Okay, very good. No grandchildren yet?
Nope. And I don't think that's anytime soon, but you never say never. It's hard for me to think that I could be a grandmother.
Oh,
At
trust me.
least not yet.
Believe me, I know. I have 2 granddaughters now, and I still find it weird when somebody calls me Papa or Grandpa or something. I'm always like that's weird. I still am having trouble with it.
Yeah,
The name anyway, not being Papa. When I pick up the granddaughters, it's great, but
yeah,
the whole name, I don't know if I'm comfortable with it or not yet.
yeah. Well, I'm all about family, but I also know that it's so important to be able to choose the right person to be with, and so the
Critical and
concept of marriage has probably changed a lot since we grew up. And in my family, I think it was more, marriage is what you commit to, get on with that commitment, and don't necessarily live together. I think it's actually really healthy to live together and see if you guys can figure out how to do laundry together.
agreed. I totally agree. And we coached all of our children that way.
Yeah.
Now, when you met Brian, were you like, now knowing you're pretty organized, right? You're pretty detailed. You're like, okay, look, I got a list here, Brian. Let me just go down these questions and I'll check. And if you score, is that how it was?
Well, he would say that I, in a facetious way, that I was stalking him.
Okay.
I actually had my eye on what it would be like to start a business that involves growing fruit or vegetables essentially in a freight container. So 10% of the energy, 10% of the water.
Okay.
It's called freight farms. And my mother and brother are pretty entrepreneurial, and we were doing some kind of little mini due diligence and identified this little company that's a organic distribution business here. And I thought, gosh, we should contact that person. If we can grow it, maybe he can sell it. And so then 2 weeks later, I walk into a holiday party and talk to the first person standing at the door, and it happened to be him. So yeah, but we're both Colorado companies to watch winners and have mutual friends. And so pretty quickly, it was kind of obvious that it was in the stars that we were supposed to meet.
Has he been on the Riderflex podcast? Do I know Brian? Do we know each other?
I don't think so. His name is Brian Freeman.
Okay. What's the name of the company?
Growers Organic. And it was sold to What Chefs Want. And he's now back in the same industry and simply not going to have a warehouse anymore. He sells truckloads full of produce and imports them from Mexico and Southern California for various retailers and food service companies.
Gotcha. And how about in your spare time? Because you have so much of it. What are the hobbies for Heather? Like you look like you're in great shape, so I'm guessing health and exercise, these things are obvious just knowing you. Tell me about hobbies. What do you do in your spare time?
So I've been a pretty avid athlete for my life, and I used to run a lot, but my knees are not as nice as they used to be. So a lot of treadmill, walking, a lot of hiking in the mountains. I live in Evergreen. That's nice. Joyous for me. I spend a lot of time just kind of outside. If I had the time, I'd go back and ride horses. I've had horses my whole life, and that's probably really my fun factor. And if in my next chapter I have a whole bunch of little animals in the backyard, that'd be great. But in the meantime, I have elk and deer that walk by every day, and I feed them. And I know that's not appropriate, but they like me a lot.
Didn't that really suck when you had to stop running on the treadmill and start walking? Because the same thing happened to me.
Yeah.
That was the last, we'll call it 24 months, somewhere in there. I don't know the exact timeline, but there was a moment where I was like, okay, I think I'm going to start walking. This was just hurting too much, Yeah.
Or stave off an operation if you can. I think that's the replacing a knee seems to be no big deal, but if I can do that in a decade from now, that'd be better.
I totally agree. Now I'll be 56 this summer, and I will tell you that my 32-year-old, he calls me and he's like, Dad, I'm on these testosterone shots. He goes, all the men at the gym are doing the T shot. And I was like, oh yeah. I was like, tell me about it. And he's like, all 50-year-old guys, everybody in their 50s, man, they're all just jacked. They're all just loving life. They all feel good. He's giving me this whole speech. He's like, so, and he says, so I got on it, and he went and got his testosterone levels checked, and he was in like the 300s, which is pretty low for a 30-year-old, which I didn't know at the time. You probably know that because you're all about health. You probably know that. He's in the 300s. So he calls me. He's like, Dad, you need to do this. And I said, well, I don't know. I'm a pretty driven guy. I mean, I would think my levels are decently high. At least that's what I assumed. So I went and got tested, and the lady's like, yeah, you're at like 319. And I was like, what? I was like, no, it can't be. She goes, yeah. She goes, you're 319. She goes, it's a little low for a guy in his 50s. And I was like, okay, I want to get on the shots. How do I get on the shots? And so my kids got me on these shots, which now I'm like, man, the treadmill's easier. The push-ups are easier. I just feel better.
Yeah.
I sleep better. So for anybody listening, if you're in your 50s, I recommend it.
Yeah, well, I think it's a male and female thing, and that hormone replacement is important as we age.
Yeah.
And men have more testosterone than women, obviously, but progesterone is another big one. For
Mm,
women,
mm.
it positively helps with brain synapses. It builds new bone. It has all kinds of wonderful beneficial effects. And so as women age, we actually lose progesterone and become estrogen dominant. So I understand what you're talking about. We've also had a few people use our technology for testosterone injections.
Okay, that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up
Yeah.
today. Yeah. So, okay, well, I would, I need your device because I'm giving myself the shots. I'm not real crazy about the needle going in my buttocks every week.
Right.
So let's talk about that offline. Okay, so hobbies. All right, so we talked about that. All right, I know you don't have a lot of spare time, but like you said earlier, you were beating yourself up before we started recording that you had not enough me time. That's another, we could do an hour-long episode on that, right, Heather? Like entrepreneurs,
Good.
executives, like you've got to spend time on your mental health, physical health, and you got to give yourself some personal time or you're just going to burn yourself out, right?
One of my friends recently coined it where it made so much sense to me. She said, "What are you doing about Heather Potter's ink?" And I said, "What do you mean about that?" And she said, "Well, just like you spend time working on your company and make sure that everybody's really, going to get to the finish line with their investment returns and things like that. If you don't invest in Heather Potter's ink, it's not going to go okay, right?
Yes.
So make sure you spend appropriate time on Heather Potter's ink." And then it was like, oh, that's the aha, which is, yeah. I know that it's important not to be last on my list. And there are moments where, I have to make myself first, but I think that becomes increasingly important as we get older, but also as a business grows and changes. From time to time, I've run PharmaJet, but my job over a period of time has been to try and make sure that we bring together the most amazing team of people, all the right investments and the orientation to make sure that it can grow and develop, because as an entity, there's a lot going on. And I know I need to care a lot about, my personal future in the same way.
Yep, totally agree. Give us the update on PharmaJet. By the way, for the listeners, pharmajet.com, pharmajet.com. Heather's been on the podcast before, so you can go back and check out the first episode as well. But give us the latest and greatest, and maybe start out with a quick overview of who PharmaJet is, what you're about, and then kind of some updates, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. That'd be my pleasure. So pharma, which connotes drugs, right? Jet connotes a jet of fluid. We essentially have created a needle-free jet injection technology like Star Trek, where push and click, a really fast fluid goes into your body. And we've focused on vaccine delivery specifically. So our PharmaJet approach is getting rid of the needles. Hopefully that inspires more people to be immunized. Make it simple for healthcare providers in any circumstance, whether or not it's a sophisticated clinic or, frankly, door to door in difficult country situations. And then along the way, with our development activities, we discovered that not only can we do all of those things and have happy patients and caregivers, but we actually have the ability to reduce the dose of immunization by moving from the muscle to the skin, so that functionally 80% less vaccine injected intradermally is about the same immune response as a full dose into the muscle.
Really? Okay.
And we also have this magic power to help affect certain kinds of vaccines. So in the case of nucleic acid, which is DNA and messenger RNA, we elicit better immune response than needle-based delivery. So it's kind of a magic superpower, if you will, where we've been working with now 80 partners to try and help them advance their indications. And the world's first DNA vaccine was approved for use with PharmaJet. It doesn't work with needles, and it uses our intradermal platform. And right now we have the world's first thermostable messenger RNA vaccine that is pending approval, which could be any day now. And same thing, we help elicit higher T cell and B cell responses than needles. And so it's joyous to be able to look back and see that what we intended has happened. But even more than that, if we can make a huge difference in bringing new indications to market for infectious disease and cancer and all kinds of other things, that's our current focus for the next decade ahead of us.
You mentioned, I don't remember this from last time. So the dose amount is less. So, wow, if you're the maker of the vaccine, you're saving lots of money because you're not having to put as much juice inside each arm. I hate to simplify it like that, but is that accurate?
I think it's mostly accurate, except it depends on who you are in that pharma company. So if your job is to sell more flu shots, as an example, and I tell you we can reduce the dose by 80%, it might not be in your interest that we can essentially help expand your supply opportunity. On the other side, however, if you're the brand new manufacturer of flu and we can approach things together with a reduced dose format, that means you can be much more competitive with a lower cost approach. From a patient's perspective or from a public health provider's perspective, being able to save money is really important. And certain vaccines are hard to make and short supply. So really, truly, there's something under the rainbow for everyone. Depends on your point of view.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're making the device or devices. Are there two different devices now? And then are you selling the devices to pharmaceutical companies or to hospitals? Who's your end client?
So we have two platforms. Our kind of standard depth and dose platform is 0.5 milliliters into the muscle. And that's a fixed dose optimized system for vaccines. They're typically 0.5 ml into the muscle.
I see. And
we're cleared for intramuscular and subcutaneous space. And then we have an intradermal platform, which delivers 0.1 ml into the skin. And that's kind of like an eye drop. It's a much of nothing injection from the volume point of view. But the magic is that we essentially flood a dermal area that provides, within less than 1/10 of a second, a rapid distribution of the vaccine or the therapeutic, and that helps hyper-accelerate the immune response. We touch more antigen-presenting cells, where, the skin is our body's barrier, and we have a lot of those special kinds of immune cells there.
Okay.
So those two platforms are the ones that we have approved and scaled. Lots of global regulatory approvals like FDA, CE mark, WHO pre-qualification.
Okay.
Then on a business basis, it depends on where you are. So I could tell you where you should go get your flu shot, for instance, in the pharmacy here in the United States. But I think if you were a public health person in a country, Ministry of Health level, we would walk in talking to you about your immunization programs, and you would benefit by using PharmaJet because we save a lot of money and we help increase the ease of care. So one example of that is we're part of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative.
Okay.
And in Pakistan, 7 million children have been immunized using our intradermal platform, and they the WHO just placed another large order. And in Pakistan, the polio situation, it's an endemic country where it's in the water and sewage systems, and therefore, if you're not immunized, you have great risk of having polio and being permanently paralyzed. So in Pakistan, we tend to find that they use our technology in mass immunization settings where 500,000 kids will be immunized in 1 week.
By who? By the government? By
the Ministry of Health and their caregivers.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So very different than a US based pharmacy where you walk in and get a flu shot. But we do all of those things. And then we also have customers that are in the form of pharmaceutical development groups. So large pharma, small pharma, well-endowed academic and government and NGO partners. Okay. And we deal with them. We start in the lab, and assuming that their discovery helps advance into, human testing stage, we go all the way through phase 1, 2, 3 with those partners. And we would end up on the label. So we would sell them product, they would likely distribute it into the channel that's most appropriate for that indication.
You white label it, and then they call it whatever they want to call it, but it was your platform.
Well, that's under discussion.
Okay.
We've not agreed yet to white labeling. We want to make sure that everybody knows it's a PharmaJet injection. But the truth is that the regulatory dictates that we essentially get married. It's our device and their injectable medicine, and it's not a generic set of data. It's very, very specific to those things working together. So we end up on the label. And therefore we kind of, go down their channels, their marketing, their points of distribution.
Okay. So that I understand, I'm going to ask as many commoner questions as I can so the listeners can understand. So Kaiser's not your client. UC Health in Colorado is not your client necessarily. It's Pfizer's your client. Am I getting that right or no?
I'd say that's mostly right. In the United States, our FDA clearance would allow for any healthcare professional to use our technology for vaccines and drug delivery for adults and children, or for prescription home use. So the doctor's job, or the healthcare provider's job, is to conduct medicine with approved products. So we have that approval. There's a distinction, though. We would like to go talk to someone and educate them about our technology, and so we would refer to the data that we have. So I would walk through and talk about flu as an example. We're on the Securus flu label here. Okay. And we can highly recommend that you use it for that. We've studied it. We have all kinds of data to confirm that it's safe, fast, and easy. So we're very careful about making sure that we don't kind of get at odds with the regulatory rules. But the truth is that healthcare providers make their own decision. And we have doctors that use our product. But in the lower and middle income countries, it tends to be that it's public health.
I see.
And it's one point of contact, and then it's their programs for immunization.
So 2 questions from that then. So my family doctor, who's part of Banner here in Colorado, he's based out of the Greeley Hospital. My family doctor, he can't on his own in his little office just order your device and give people shots with that without getting approval from Banner.
I don't know that would be true. He certainly can order the device. I guess if he doesn't control the payments, and somebody else has to opine on that.
I see.
He certainly could legally do that. That's not a problem at all.
Okay. I see why you're targeting I don't know if it's a specific target or not, but I would be targeting other countries with universal government health program, where it's one point of like, look, if we just sell this person right here, boom, we're done.
And in part, that's true. I think we would rather sell millions of syringes as opposed to 500 syringes, right? Yes. The economics make a big difference. Yes.
Any countries you're specifically working on right now? Anything about to close? Anything you can share?
Yeah, we are. We're very excited that this thermostable messenger RNA COVID indication will be approved shortly in India. They're using our intradermal platform. And the distinction there is that the Pfizer and Moderna mRNA vaccines that are kind of now standard of care are deeply frozen. So -40, -70 degrees. And that cold chain almost doesn't exist anywhere in the world. It's very expensive. And this innovative Indian company has been able to stabilize the mRNA so that it's simple cold chain, like your refrigerator. Okay. And that means it's much lower cost. So consequently, that has significant application for lower and middle income countries, particularly, and many of whom kind of lost out in terms of access to appropriate vaccines. Because COVID's endemic, we don't know how it will change, but it'll probably be a little bit like flu. You might go get your annual COVID shot, just like you would get your annual flu shot. So that's exciting. We are working currently to enroll women, adolescent girls in Indonesia for an HPV vaccine study.
Okay.
It's a reduced dose approach. So we've already done 2 small studies. This is a big pivotal study to prove what we expect to be true, which would be that 80% less vaccine injected into the skin produces a non-inferior level of immunity versus a full dose. And that helps stretch supply and save money. And that vaccine is hugely important because women in lower middle income countries, it's the second leading cause of death, cervical cancer.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Very important vaccine, and it's highly effective. We're also working to begin enrollment this year in Brazil for an influenza approach, also fractional dose. We have an enrollment that will start with a U.S. government development called Venezuelan equine encephalitis vaccine. One of our cancer collaboration partners is preparing for phase 3 study with the FDA for cervical cancer. Wow. So lots going on, and I could keep going, but it's busy, busy, busy. Yes.
How about just replacing needles globally? I mean,
that pretty old simple concept.
I mean, every time I think about you, like if I see something pop up on LinkedIn, or I'm reminded about you or PharmaJet, and I'll see something. I always think to myself, I don't. What's the benefit of continuing to use a needle? Like, why wouldn't you? And I know I asked you that question on the last one, but I just don't understand why we wouldn't just replace needles and use your device. It's more comfortable, and it's faster to market. It improves performance. All the stuff you got on your website. Like, why are we still using needles? I guess is my short question.
Yeah, I think the to be a ubiquitous company takes a long time, and it costs lots of money. So how long ago did we all start using the internet? It was CompuServe in 1991 when I finished business school, and then people had AOL accounts and, so I think there's evolution of markets that takes some time. Whether or not it's Google or it's Uber or all these household names that we think it was always there, it took some time. Okay. I think increasingly for DNA vaccines to come to market, they'll come to market with PharmaJet's needle-free jet injection technology, because we help increase the immune response so significantly versus needles. Needles just don't move the bar at all. So there will be categories of infectious disease, cancer, autoimmune, allergy indications during this coming decade. And therefore, we will be the standard of care, the only standard of care there. But in other places, some people don't care about whether or not it's a needle or a needle-free. Some people are deathly afraid of needles. Right. So I think it just depends on the environment. And then in certain countries, there's massive pass-along disease risk with needle stick or reuse.
Right. Yes.
And we have just enormous support for our intradermal product in places like Pakistan and Somalia. We're rolling out in Nigeria right now. Where the environments are sometimes really, really challenging.
But is there any reason why eventually every doctor's office, like if I go to my family doctor and he's like, hey, you need your tetanus shot or whatever, I don't know, like they wouldn't just use your device instead of a needle? Is there any reason to think why we couldn't eventually just get there for every type of shot?
I think we can get there, but it's going to be a little bit longer. And there isn't that kind of 100th monkey approach where you need a statistically significant number of people and or data or studies to make a ubiquitous claim. So for instance, in the COVID scenario, there's been easily a couple 100 million messenger RNA COVID shots, Pfizer, Moderna, but they had emergency use authorization to start because it was not fully clear, about the statistics and evidence.
That's what you need. Emergency. That's what you need.
There will be a tipping point.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, okay. I guess you're right. I guess when we went from wagon wheels to rubber tires, I guess it wasn't overnight, huh?
Yeah. Unfortunately, maybe that's why I'm a little bit tired. It's just been
wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great? It would be great though if, like, years from now, you're still here with us on planet Earth to be able to look back and go, yes, I was part of that. I was part of that whole thing that transitioned the entire globe away from needles.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I'm careful not to say that we'll replace needles everywhere because, we don't even have enough capacity. There's probably, 20 billion injections in the world, and that's a lot.
A
But,
year, a day? What is that? A year?
that's a year. Yeah.
20 billion a year?
Okay. The vaccine segment would probably be close to 5 billion per year.
Okay.
It's still a lot more than what
still...
we have in capacity.
Well, is your device reusable?
Well, our device is spring force, and that
okay.
is reusable. We've tested it to 30,000 uses without failure to meet our regulatory requirements.
Okay.
But the syringes auto-disable after each use. So they are single use, and you can't reuse them. We've envisioned a way, we've created a way that it's just not possible.
Okay. How big is the company now? People, revenue? I don't know what you want to share. And I know you started it at zero, like 18 years ago or 15 years ago. Can you share size with us at all? I don't know what you can share.
Well, given that we're blasting the world, I'll be a little bit careful, but we probably have close to 25 people now that are part of PharmaJet, but by extension, we have contract manufacturing relationships in the US and Singapore, so that we can bolt on extra people and capabilities. So on a look-through basis, we're larger. We have a couple people in the field in other countries to help cover the globe, but then we also have distribution arrangements by country. So it's the same concept. We don't employ those distributors, but by virtue of association, they help us. We have millions of dollars of revenue.
I'll tell you what ChatGPT told me you were doing in revenue.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's out there. Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing about ChatGPT is we all realize it's pretty cool, but it's not always accurate.
Yeah. So it's just like Crunchbase isn't always accurate about how much capital we've raised either. But
okay, good. Let's talk about that one. ChatGPT said you were $100 million company.
Well, we're a bit shy from that number, but that's nice. That's where we're headed.
Very good.
It's funny because I think the notion of PharmaJet being kind of this billion-dollar business, and 100 million, we think in syringes, 100 million syringes, $100 million of revenue kind of thing. We have a little ways to go, but the truth is that a good portion of what we're working on are completely novel indications. So while we'll be involved with flu and HPV and polio, which are very large immunization funnels annually, we also will find, again, that there will be indications that cure cancer, that affect infectious disease that we can't develop things fast enough for. I think that's the joyous bit for us.
Speaking of Crunchbase, so how much have you raised, and are you in a current race?
Well, we are in a current race. A little bit more money allows us to go more quickly and accelerating our timelines, while at the same time kind of positioning PharmaJet to be owned by someone else. We know very clearly that if we were owned by a bigger company that had lots of capabilities, that they could both reduce cost and help us go more quickly. The investor base is all high net worth and family office investors, although some of those people in their day job run investment funds, so we have a deep repository of very credentialed professional financial folks. We also have doctors. We have certain groups that don't fully understand what we do, but they understand the impact that we can make in health. And cumulatively, we've raised $77 million for our development so far, and we're looking for 10.
Looking for 10. Okay. Has anybody like Pfizer or anybody invested yet?
No, and we're careful about that because we want to make sure that there is an opportunity for a sufficient exit. We don't have a forced exit provision that might be typical in a financial institution controlled investment. But we we would welcome, for instance, Pfizer as a potential owner of PharmaJet. Strategic groups that could be interested could be pharmaceutical companies, where they are attracted to the fact that we might make things work better than needles, or for instance, needle and syringe producers or device producers, because they already have things like packaging and sterilization and distribution systems, that would be valuable.
Okay.
But we want to make sure that there isn't kind of a blocking right. So we don't have a strategic investor in our cap structure today.
Okay.
For a reason.
Based on your answer, it sounds like you would take meetings right now. If somebody wanted to buy it, you'd be like, yeah, let's go to dinner. Sure.
Well, we have a few people kind of surveilling PharmaJet. I think because of late, there's been quite a lot of announced, good progress and some firsts and onlys.
Okay.
I think that causes companies to take notice. It's a strange market situation today. I mean, as everybody knows, the world's a little fragile and a lot of economic turbulence. And when that happens, I think it kind of crushes the M&A market a little bit and the public offering market a little bit. But the truth is that there hasn't been any diminished activity in immunization of late. Thanks to the pandemic, everybody's keenly aware that we need to continue to invest in creating new solutions, because the next pandemic or epidemic or healthcare crisis could be right around the corner. And governments typically spend a lot of money doing those things quietly. So we can play a definite role in global health, pandemic preparedness, public health, immunization, and with some of these next generation developments like curing cancer. That's super, super exciting. And we definitely have those candidates too.
Here's a conspiracy outlook for you. What happens if one of the needle producing manufacturers buys all your patents just to shut it down and squash it so they can keep making needles?
Well, that'll be ingrained in the legal documents, of course, that's not possible. But I think, we're beyond the buy and kill stage.
Okay.
Where we have, if you consider, we have 80 partners globally with probably close to 150 development programs of these various indications. Some of those programs are in the labs with these large pharmaceutical companies.
Okay.
If we can make something work better, I think that there's massive value there, where it's about, scientific discovery, and that's really proceeding at a relatively rapid rate now. And I think we can be a useful tool for large pharma companies that would like to own PharmaJet.
If one more question here on exit type stuff before I ask you some wrap up questions. If Pfizer or Moderna or if somebody huge bought it, does Heather retire, or would she be an employee ride along for 24 months?
My personal goal is, to make sure my investors get to the end of the rainbow and there's a fabulous transition. Yeah. But I'm truly not the inventor of our product. Our CEO, Chris Capello, who's been with us for 13 years, really is the brainchild behind what we have that's scaled and validated and approved. And the truth is he would have to go with the business. He's really the secret sauce there.
You said that so eloquently, right? I mean, my language would sound more like this. It would be like you and Chris are at a bar and you're like, look, bro, I'm not doing any ride alongs. Like, you're going to go do that. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Well, if they said, would you go to Timbuktu and be in charge of an immunization program, I'd be happy to volunteer. But they don't need me in the lab, and I'm not an engineer. So,
and by the way, volunteer means on Heather's schedule, just so we're all clear. Heather's schedule.
No, not a moment to waste to help in the world. I'm sure there's lots to do, but
your mom has to be super proud too, because I know she was co-founder with you in this thing. She's got to just be ecstatic, right? I mean,
she really is. I think it's joyous. She would say, as a caregiver, you have to experience needle stick sometime during your career, and there's great concern on both sides, caregiver and patient. So that issue all by itself, has really allowed her to to work with some of our partners over time and giving, healthcare training. She's been all over the world.
That's great.
And to have her then see that little glimmer of, oh my gosh, and we probably can make it work better now coming to fruition, is something that she's just enormously proud of.
Oh yeah. Super special.
Yeah.
We were kind of joking around about this earlier, I think before the recording. You are dealing with very powerful organizations. I mean, hell, some of the most powerful organizations on planet Earth, right? Super powerful people that control a lot of things. And I don't want to go too weird here. I don't want to go Twilight Zone, but have you ever like gotten a weird phone call? Have you ever gotten a phone call like, hey, stop doing that? Hey, like, what do has anything ever weird happened where powerful people are trying to steer you in a direction and you're like, oh man, that's making me feel uneasy?
In our earlier era of time, yes, I have had occasions where I've had maybe early warning signals about something coming down the pike to make sure that we're aware of, or in our relationship with the World Health Organization around the polio initiative, there was a person who visited us, came and sat in our conference room and said, I need to know now that you're going to be on this journey with me, and we're not going to get to the end of the journey and you just give up, right? You're not going to turn your back on us because we're going to go change the approach to how we immunize. And this was all about reducing the dose and doing all the clinical studies necessary. So, maybe in different sorts of ways, there certainly have been situations where people have, really extended, a courtesy to us to either make sure that we're paying attention or to ask our help, or to whisper that maybe we should go talk to somebody about something. But I'd say not of late.
Okay.
Honestly, it's really more that there is this refreshed approach to trying to collaborate,
Okay.
in at least in the vaccine and therapeutic space, because again, thanks to the pandemic, and I say that facetiously, the world is keenly aware that it's borderless, right? We all share the healthcare burden in the world, and we need to cooperate in order to make a difference.
I was hoping you'd tell me a fun story, like Bruno called, threatened you or something. I heard a little clip from Jay Leno recently. Jay Leno was telling a story about when Frank Sinatra called and said, hey, I need you to come to this fundraiser event and do your little bit, And Leno was like, I'm sorry, I'm busy. I'm booked that week with some other people. And then like a couple hours later, Frank Sinatra's agent called and said, hey, he said, hey, yeah, those other people, yeah, they don't need you anymore. So your calendar's free now. You could be here.
We solved that problem for you.
I know we're almost out of time. I'm going to hit you with just one more, maybe two. You probably have a meeting. You're super busy. You probably have a meeting. I want to hit you with one more kind of outside the lines here.
Okay.
You can decide whether or not to edit this off the
Oh,
podcast.
yes, go for it. Lay it on me. What's your question?
COVID, as it was looking back now as we are beginning to look backwards, right? So easy to play quarterback afterwards, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Why didn't he throw the ball on that play?
Yep.
Well, it's because you didn't have a 300-pound lineman chasing you at the time. That's why. How was it handled, Heather? In your that's a big question. We could do a whole hour podcast, but I'm curious because you're so close to it based on your business. How did the country handle it? And what would you have done differently? Can you give me some thoughts on it?
Yeah. I've spoken to a few people that were part of Project Warp Speed, which became the coined term of, let's go fast and solve this pandemic situation. Okay. We also were in advance already collaborating with BARDA, which handles some of the preparedness planning in the United States. That was led by Rick Bright, who ultimately became the whistleblower with 200 pages, in Congress testifying about the decisions that were being made without science. I think, it's hard. Scientists want to make very rigorous decisions with the best thinking in mind and with the time to evaluate what's happening. So people who were within Project Warp Speed were working very, very hard and wanting to go as quickly as possible, thinking that the pandemic would be even worse than what it was.
Right.
And the business people were pushing to go fast, and the scientists in some cases were really, reticent to do that. So I think, looking back, they probably should have run parallel paths of a little bit of go fast and a lot more scientific diversity.
Okay.
Ultimately, I think that there were some 140 COVID indications that started in the lab. We had 20 documented collaborations outside the United States, but in the US, where Pfizer got their big balance sheet behind BioNTech, which is a German technology. Thank goodness they did. They took a lot of risk, and good for them. In certain other countries, however, they had to proceed on their own to try and back their own developments, because it became abundantly clear in the beginning, at least from this perspective in the US, that the US wasn't going to share, or in other words, US citizens first, everybody else later.
Okay.
And it gave rise to massive innovation around the world, so there was a positive aspect there, but I think that it could have had maybe a little bit better coordination. And then certain things were done so quickly and perhaps without thought, where there was a kind of a pre-filled needle product that kind of, you fill a little packet and you put the needle in and you go squish. And in concept, that sounded great. And so there was a whole bunch of funding committed there. But what ended up happening is that nobody considered that the vaccine had to be frozen at -40 and -70 Fahrenheit, and the plastics couldn't handle the freezing. So some of these activities happening in real time probably had, mentally, kind of some no man's logic, and that's where they lacked a little bit of the scientific rigor. But we are where we are. I believe that innovation's been sparked, more of it's coming, and I appreciate the FDA being able to kind of move quickly and be open to real time evaluation.
Okay.
And I hope we don't go back to the old ways where everything is unbelievably slow and stifles innovation.
One last question. I know I'm over on time. This will be a fast one. You have been to a lot of countries that are third world, poor countries, underdeveloped. You see it all the time. If you were the most powerful person on the planet and you could do whatever you wanted, would you evenly distribute wealth? Would you do something to spread funding more evenly across the globe if you could?
Well, I think that if you're just looking at plain old economics of people need a little bit of a landing pad in order to be able to have a productive life and grow and take care of their families and be educated. There are very successful social experiments in places like Finland where there is that support system. Okay. And you don't find that there's homeless people on the streets. And you do find that people find vocations, various countries like the Netherlands, same kind of thing. Tax rates are higher, a lot higher, and there's universal health care. So it's really hard to simply say that would work out here in the United States because our system is so different. But I do think that there are certain states here that have had those experiments in mind. I know that Los Angeles of late has been providing some basic housing for homeless people to try and get them situated so that they have a safe place to be and a fresh start. I do believe that there is a necessity of having some framework to try and help people that are, just in huge need, because otherwise, if society functionally just falls apart, nobody wins. So, but I'm not a wealth redistribution fan, because I do think there needs to be an incentive. Why do you get up in the morning to feed yourself, house yourself, take care of your family? And if the check just showed up, I don't know, would you be the same? Would you feel the same? Would you act as responsibly? I'm not sure, but I do know that there are people working on that, and there's some really good examples out there.
Heather, thank you. I really appreciate you being back on the Riderflex podcast and giving us an update. It is always a pleasure speaking with you.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure, Stephen. I just hope that people enjoy listening to the banter, and grateful for you reaching out and supporting me and PharmaJet. And thank you.